Hey guys! I've been adding watercolors to my collection over the past few months, and I thought it was time to swatch them all and compare what I've added to what I already have, and sort of discuss my thought process behind adding these particular paints. I'm going to split everything into two videos. I have a handful of paints from Daniel Smith and a handful from Mgram, so keep an eye out for the Mgram video coming on Friday. Today, everything is Daniel Smith. We are going to go through these alphabetically since I don't really have enough paints to do rainbow order, so we're going to start with what is probably the more boring addition to my collection, Burnt Umber, created with pigment PBR7. In my student grade Saulnier palette, I do have all of the burnt umbers and the burnt siennas and all those kind of earth tones, but they aren't super high quality. I do have permanent brown from Daniel Smith in my palette, but it is a very reddish brown, very close to like an Indian red or a burnt sienna, and I wanted something that is more of a basic cooler brown. I've also seen a lot of people use burnt umber for deepening skin tones, even though it is a granulating color, but as you can see from my swatches, it really doesn't granulate too much, so I think it will definitely work great for skin mixes. Here it is compared with the other brown on my palette, Permanent Brown by Daniel Smith. You can see that they're very, very different browns. And here it is compared to my other burnt umber, which is from the Saulnier La Petite Aquarelle palette, which is still a great palette and I do still love it. I just wanted a stronger, more pigmented version of burnt umber, and I obviously have that here. Daniel Smith's version is also more of that kind of chocolate, cool color I was looking for. The next paint is Daniel Smith's Lemon Yellow, created from PY175. The dried swatch scan of this has the shadows of blue fingerprints because I unfortunately trimmed a swatch for a blue paint and then I trimmed the lemon yellow swatch and I didn't realize the dried paint would transfer and that it was all over my fingers. The yellow previously in my palette was Holbein's Permanent Lemon Yellow, or Yellow Lemon, one of those, which is a lovely color, but it is a 3-pigment mix, and therefore it's not really the greatest for mixing. Lemon yellow is a single pigment. It is incredibly transparent for yellow. I was honestly shocked when I started swatching it, as I'm so used to yellows being listed as transparent, but being more semi-transparent. And this is a fairly neutral yellow. It's not too orange, it's okay, it's a little on the green side, but I still feel it's kind of in that middle ground. It also has fantastic light fastness, which is another trait that can be really hard to find in yellows. Here is lemon yellow compared to basically every yellow I have available to me. I'm not going to do shade by shade comparisons because I think you can see how different it is. And I know I screwed up the dried swatch, but I think you can still see how incredibly, absurdly transparent it is compared to everything else in my collection. Next is Daniel Smith's Moonglow. This is another one of their special granulating, separating paints in the same vein as one of my favorites, Rose of Ultramarine. Moonglow is a 3-pigment mix of Viridian, which is PG18, Ultramarine Blue, which is PB29, and Anthraquinoid Red, which is PR177. The Anthra Red floats as the ultramarine settles, which creates some incredibly gorgeous effects. I tested it with salt in my video all about salt washes, so I will link that in the info card in the top right corner of this video. I think in that video you can really see how the separation works. Moonglow seems like one of those colors that wouldn't really work in illustration work and portraits, but it's actually incredibly versatile. An artist named Jenny Granberry creates really stunning portraits using it, and I will link her blog post all about Moonglow down below for you to check out. I don't really have any comparisons for Moonglow to any other colors because I don't really own anything that is like it, except for like maybe a Payne's Gray, but not really, so we're just gonna move on. Phthalo Blue Red shade is one of those workhorse mixing colors that I really should have had sooner. Daniel Smith creates theirs with PB15:6, though many Phthalo Blue Red shades are made with PB15:1. I really love cool colors, and my blues were sadly lacking. I mean, I have Prussian blue, but I'm concerned about the light fastness since I know some artists have had issues with fading, and I also wanted a non-granulating alternative to my Holbein Ultramarine Deep. So yeah, it's not really close, but I feel Phthalo Blue Red shade has a lot of the deepness I appreciate in Ultramarine Deep, at least in Daniel Smith's version. I do have some new blues that are similar to Phthalo Blue Red shade, but I will be comparing them in the M-gram video, and I don't want there to be any spoilers. But here is Phthalo Blue Red shade compared to Holbein's Ultramarine Deep, which is a much more vivid blue. And here it is compared to Sennelier Le Petit's Cobalt Blue hue, which is probably the closest color I have to Phthalo Blue Red shade, but you can see the Phthalo Blue is much, much deeper. And my last paint is Quinacridone Rose, which is created with PV19. This is another one of those colors that I'm actually kind of embarrassed that I didn't have it sooner because it is yet another workhorse mixing color. This is such an absurdly beautiful color with so much depth, as you can see from my swatch, and I am so happy to finally have this one on my palette. For comparison, I previously had Holbein's Crimson Lake, which is created using the same PV19 pigment, but it is much more muted and kind of more on the purple side. And then there's Rose Madder Lacquer from Sennelier. The Le Petit line doesn't include pigment information, as you may have noticed, but these do seem very close, so I would probably hazard to guess it probably has PV19 in it. So yeah, these are the paints I've added to my collection that are all Daniel Smith, so stay tuned for part 2 with M-gram. If it's already up, I'll try to remember to include it in the top right corner here, so you can go check that out. There are a few more M-gram paints since they're a bit cheaper here in Canada land. I did grab these Daniel Smith paints either during sales at Curry's, or in the case of Lemon Yellow, I picked it up from Jackson's through Amazon because all my usual local art stores didn't carry this particular paint. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe and give this a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I create new art videos every Friday, and I hope to see you at the next one. Bye!